What if an entire continent once stretched across the Pacific Ocean and then vanished without a trace? Imagine sailing into the endless blue, knowing that somewhere beneath the waves lies the memory of a lost world, a place called Lemuria, and another called Mu. In this journey, we will trace their origins, compare myth with science, and uncover new evidence that may change everything we thought we knew. Are these continents pure legend, or fragments of a forgotten history? Let's begin. The story of Lemuria and Mu begins not with ancient maps or stone ruins, but with the curiosity of 19th century scientists. In 1864, British zoologist Philip Sclater noticed something unusual. He had been studying lemurs, small primates, found in Madagascar and India, but curiously, not in Africa or the Middle East. This puzzled him. If these animals once roamed freely, how could they have crossed the vast distances between these regions? Sclater proposed a bold idea. Perhaps there had once been a giant landmass connecting Madagascar, India, and parts of the Pacific. Over millions of years, this land had sunk beneath the ocean. He called it Lemuria, after the lemurs that inspired the theory. At the time, the idea made sense. Plate tectonics had not yet been discovered. Scientists often explained the distribution of animals and plants by imagining lost land bridges. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, another legend was taking shape. In the late 19th century, explorer and writer Augustus Leplongeon claimed to have translated ancient Mayan texts. These, he said, spoke of a vast Pacific continent called Mu, home to an advanced civilization. According to him, Mu was the mother culture of all humanity, influencing Egypt, India, and Mesoamerica before being swallowed by the sea. His ideas were expanded by British author James Churchward, who in the 1920s published The Lost Continent. Of Mu, Churchward described Mu as a tropical paradise, 10,000 miles wide, supporting 64 million people. They built soaring temples, mastered navigation, and spread their knowledge across the globe. Then, in a cataclysm of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, Mu vanished beneath the waves in a single night. To a world fascinated by Atlantis, Churchward's vision was irresistible. His books sold millions, cementing Mu as one of the great lost lands of popular imagination. But was any of it true? Or were these stories a mixture of science, misunderstanding, and the timeless human love for mystery? In the decades that followed, Lemuria and Mu would become more than theories. They would grow into legends, whispered about by scholars, mystics, and explorers alike. Yet their origins, as we've seen, lie not in ancient ruins, but in the pages of 19th century science and speculation. And that is where our journey truly begins. Lemuria was never meant to be a myth. It was a scientific hypothesis, one that quickly escaped the laboratory. Sclater's idea inspired geologists, naturalists, and even mapmakers. By the late 1800s, maps of Lemuria appeared in scientific journals, often stretching from Madagascar to Southeast Asia, sometimes even touching the far reaches of the Pacific. In these maps, Lemuria was imagined as a bridge, a vast tropical land covered in jungles, mountains, and strange beasts. For many Victorians, it made sense. After all, without the theory of continental drift, the scattered pieces of Earth's continents seemed like a puzzle in need of invisible connectors. But Lemuria's scientific life was short. By the early 20th century, as the theory of plate tectonics began to take shape, scientists realized there was no need for a lost land to explain lemurs' distribution. Shifting continents and ancient island chains told the story instead. Yet by then, Lemuria had slipped from science into legend. Writers of the Theosophical Society adopted Lemuria as the cradle of an ancient, spiritually advanced race. They described towering beings with psychic abilities, living in harmony with nature until they, too, perished in a great flood. These mystical visions, though unproven, spread far beyond academic circles. Lemuria appeared in novels, art, and eventually, New Age spiritual teachings. Some claimed survivors of Lemuria fled to the mountains of Tibet. Others believed they retreated deep underground beneath Mount Shasta in California, where their descendants still live in hidden crystal cities. The leap from zoological theory to mystical homeland may seem absurd, but it reflects a deeper truth. People are drawn to stories of lost worlds because they offer something science alone cannot: a sense of wonder and a connection to a forgotten past that feels almost within reach. In the case of Lemuria, that past stretches across the warm waters of the Indian and Pacific Oceans to places where coral reefs glow and volcanic islands rise like green jewels. Could such beauty really hide the remains of a vanished continent? That question would lead others to search not for Lemuria, but for Mu, the true lost world of the Pacific. If Lemuria began as a scientific theory, Mu was born from pure imagination. In the late 19th century, Augustus Leplongeon claimed he had uncovered secrets in ancient Mayan writings. He said these texts told of a great land in the Pacific Ocean, a place called Mu, according to him. Mu was the birthplace of all civilization. From this paradise, people sailed to Egypt, to India, to the Americas, carrying knowledge, art, and language. But it was James Churchward, a British-born inventor and writer, who gave Mu its most famous form. In the 1920s, he published The Lost Continent of Mu, a book that painted Mu as a vast tropical empire. Churchward claims to have studied ancient Nagel tablets given to him by a priest in India. On them, he said, were records of Mu's glory. A continent 10,000 miles wide, filled with temples, gardens, and 64 million people, the people of Mu, he wrote, were wise, peaceful, and spiritually advanced. They built colossal stone cities, navigated the seas with star maps, and influenced cultures around the world. Then disaster struck. Violent volcanic eruptions shook the land. Earthquakes tore the ground apart. In a single, terrible night, Mu sank beneath the ocean. Millions died, their cities swallowed by the waves. Only a few survivors escaped to faraway islands, carrying fragments of their knowledge with them. To a world hungry for mystery, Churchward's Mu was irresistible. Newspapers covered his ideas, explorers debated them, and readers dreamed of a lost Pacific Eden. But the academic world was skeptical. No evidence of Churchward's Nagel tablets was ever found, and no geological record supported a continent in the middle of the Pacific. Still, the myth had taken root, and for many, it didn't matter whether Mu was real. The story itself had power. It spoke of a golden age, a perfect world lost forever. And that is why, even today, the legend of Mu still stirs the imagination. Long before Western writers dreamed of Lemuria or Mu, the peoples of the Pacific told their own stories of lands that vanished. In the Marquesas Islands, elders speak of Hiva, a homeland destroyed by rising seas. Survivors fled in canoes seeking new islands under the stars. In Hawaii, chants recall the sinking of entire valleys. swallowed by the ocean after great storms in Polynesian navigation lore. There are references to floating lands that appeared and disappeared, perhaps volcanic islands rising and collapsing, or memories of real disasters in the Indian Ocean. Tamil traditions tell of Kumari Kandam, a lost land south of India said to be the seat of an ancient kingdom. Its people were poets, warriors, and sailors. The similarities are striking: a rich homeland, a sudden catastrophe, survivors scattering to distant shores. Were these myths simply symbolic? Lessons about impermanence and survival? Or could they be faint cultural memories of ancient floods and earthquakes? Oral tradition is powerful. It can preserve echoes of real events for thousands of years. The eruption of Santorini, the flooding of Doggerland, both live on in regional myths, so it is not impossible that somewhere in these Pacific legends, there are traces of a real disaster. Yet, these stories are also shaped by the needs of the people telling them. They inspire unity, identity, and a sense of connection to ancestors, and like Lemuria and Mu, they remind us that the ocean is not empty. It holds both mystery and memory. If the legends are true, then somewhere beneath the Pacific must lie their remains over the past century. Divers and explorers have searched for clues, and in a few places, they have found mysteries that still spark debate. Off the coast of Yonaguni in Japan, strange stone formations rise from the seabed. Massive steps, terraces, and sharp-angled blocks, carved with uncanny precision. Some say they are the ruins of an ancient city. Others insist they are natural rock, shaped by time and tide far to the south. In Micronesia lies Nan Madol, a city built on artificial islands. Walls of basalt columns rise from shallow waters. Connected by canals, its origins are unclear. But local legends speak of powerful rulers who commanded the stones to move. Along the Pacific Rim, sonar surveys have revealed submerged ridges and plateaus. Could these be the mountain peaks of a drowned continent? Geologists point to features like the Ontong Java Plateau and the Kerguelen Plateau. Vast underwater landforms, some as large as small continents, most were created by volcanic activity millions of years ago. But their sheer scale fuels speculation. And then there are the coral terraces of the Pacific Islands, ancient shorelines now far below the surface, silent witnesses to past changes in sea level. Each of these discoveries offers a fragment of a puzzle. None prove the existence of Lemuria or Mu, but they keep the door to possibility open. The ocean, after all, still hides more than it reveals. As romantic as the legends may be, modern science offers a different story. In the mid-20th century, the theory of plate tectonics transformed our understanding of Earth's surface. Continents are not fixed, they drift slowly over millions of years, carried on massive plates of the planet's crust. The Pacific Ocean, unlike the Atlantic, is dominated by deep trenches and volcanic arcs. These are signs of crust being destroyed, not created. For a landmass the size of Lemuria or Mu to sink completely, it would have to be made of oceanic crust, which is too dense to float. Continental crust, the kind we live on, does not simply disappear into the deep ocean. Geologists also point out there is no evidence of a lost Pacific continent in the last several million years. Sediment cores, volcanic records, and seafloor mapping show nothing of the kind. Even the impressive underwater plateaus like on Java are volcanic in origin. They were never dry land in human history. This doesn't mean land hasn't been lost. Smaller islands do vanish. Volcanic peaks collapse, coral atolls sink. Entire island chains have changed shape in living memory, but a continent the size described in the legends, vanishing in a single night, is, by current science, impossible, and yet, the absence of proof has never stopped the search because science, too, is always evolving, new tools, new discoveries. Sometimes change what we believe to be certain, and in the case of Lemuria and Mu, even the most skeptical scientists admit, the ocean still holds surprises, even as science dismissed the idea of lost continents. Lemuria and Mu refused to fade away in the early 20th century. The Theosophical Society embraced Lemuria as the cradle of a spiritually advanced race. They wrote of tall beings with luminous skin and cities made of crystal. Later, in the New Age movement of the 1970s and 80s, Lemuria and Mu became symbols of higher consciousness. Channelers claimed to receive messages from Lemurian elders, living in hidden realms beneath Mount Shasta in California. Mu was reimagined as a paradise of peace and harmony, where humanity first learned to live in balance with nature, in books, films, and online forums. These worlds are alive. They inspire art, music, and even personal belief systems for many. It is not about physical evidence, but about what these places represent, a longing for a lost golden age, when humanity was wiser, kinder, more connected. Even video games and TV shows borrow from these legends, bringing Lemuria and Mu to new generations. In this way, the myths have achieved a kind of immortality. They may not exist in the geological record, but they live on in our imagination, and as long as the ocean stretches to the horizon, there will be those who wonder what lies beneath. In recent years, new technology has begun to peel back the veil of the ocean. High-resolution sonar, LiDAR mapping, and AI analysis are revealing details of the seafloor never seen before. Vast submerged features have been mapped with extraordinary clarity. Some, like Zealandia, challenge our definition of a continent. Zealandia lies beneath the waters east of Australia. 93% of it is underwater. Yet it has continental crust, mountains, and even fossil evidence of forests. It is proof that continents can sink, at least partially, over millions of years. Could Lemuria and Mu have been similar? Large land masses slowly broken apart, drowned by rising seas and reshaped by tectonic forces. Climate science adds another layer. At the end of the last ice age, melting glaciers raised sea levels by more than 120 meters. Entire coastal regions vanished, taking with them the homes of ancient peoples. Perhaps the legends of Mu and Lemuria are cultural memories of these real floods, amplified and transformed over centuries of storytelling. And yet, some researchers believe there may still be physical evidence to find. Sunken structures, ancient harbors, megaliths hidden beneath coral growth. The Pacific is vast, and only a fraction of its floor has been explored in detail. What secrets remain in the uncharted depths? Pause. Perhaps one day we will discover something that blurs the line between myth and reality. Until then, Lemuria and Mu remain suspended in the space between imagination and possibility. we set out to find the truth behind Lemuria and Mu. We traced their birth in the minds of scientists and storytellers. We compared them with ancient legends and the findings of modern science. 3 things are clear. First, these myths reveal our deep desire to connect with a lost past. Second, they show how science and imagination can shape each other. And third, they remind us that the ocean still holds more mysteries than we have solved. But here is the twist. Perhaps Lemuria and Mu were never meant to be found on any map. Perhaps they are reflections of something else, a memory carried in the human soul, of a time when the world felt whole, and maybe the real lost continent is not under the waves but within us, waiting to be rediscovered.